question of terminating tax exemption. They really went after people. I was in a room and I said, why don't you speak up more? And I had 50 pastors in the room, 2 rabbis, 50 pastors. We had a number of religious leaders, heavy on the pastors, I will say that. But they said to me, I said, I want to hear you. They said, we really can't speak because of the Johnson Amendment. This was in 2015, just before I announced. I said, that means that, explain it to me. If we speak out, and if the government wants to, they will take away our tax-exempt status. I said, so you have less power, and you're the people that I want to hear from. You have less power than, we were in Trump Tower, 60 stories up, looking down. I said, than any people walking on that sidewalk outside. He said, yes, in many ways we do. We can't speak up. And I got it so that the people that we want to hear can now speak up, so that Mike Huckabee spoke up anyway. I don't know. Did this have any? I don't think it had much impact on you. It had no impact on Mike. But it had a lot of impact on a lot of other people, and they have been speaking up, and it's important that they do so. I issued guidance making clear that the right to freedom of worship does not end at the door of a public school. Public schools are in tremendous trouble. And I was the first and only president to convene a meeting at the United Nations to end religious persecution worldwide. No other president has ever brought it up. As president, I stood proudly with our friend and ally, the State of Israel. I did more for Israel, they say, than any other president. I kept my promise, recognized Israel's eternal capital, Jerusalem, and opened the American embassy in Jerusalem. And I tell the story that sometimes, I don't know, it's maybe more of a good business story, but a general stood before me with something to sign, executive order, because I had won that battle. And it was a bill, essentially, for $2 billion to build an embassy in Jerusalem. And I said, General, what is this for? Sir, this is to build an embassy in Jerusalem. I said, this says $2 billion. How can you spend $2 billion on, like, I envisioned it as a one-story building, right? Nobody in this room, if you're in the real estate business, would spend quite that much. Maybe you'd spend like $2. But I said, how can you ask for $2 billion? Well, that's what they told. By the time you buy the land, sir, and you build the building and everything else, it's going to cost $2 billion. So I called up our ambassador and I said, David, see if there's something we have there already. We own a lot of land in Jerusalem. Do we have a great piece? And maybe it has like a little building on it where we can fix it up real cheap and we can... See, I'll always be in the real estate business, you know. I'll always love that business, and I love that business. We did great in that business. That's a great business, but very creative. And I said, see what you have. They called me back 2 days later and said, sir, we have a fantastic site. We've owned it for many, many years. You know, we were there sort of like early on first. We have a great site, and there's a building on it that's been essentially abandoned, but it's a very strong structure. And we think we could fix it up and get it open very quickly. I said, how does it compare with the site that we're going to buy, that they want to buy for a ridiculous amount of money? By the way, that particular person who owned that site is not happy with me, I can tell you. That is not a person. We're going to pay hundreds of millions of dollars for this site. So I said, what do you think of the building? Well, I think we could fix it up. So they called me back a week later. I sent some people over. They said, sir, we can build a new embassy for $400,000. I said, let me ask you a question. It's the only time I ever said this. I said, listen, it sounds too cheap. We got to make it more. No, it actually sounded, I never did that. Usually I'll say, make it 200,000. I said, we got to make it more. It doesn't sound right. But a friend of mine in a big building in Manhattan has beautiful white stone, beige, beautiful beige and white stone opposite his elevator bank. And every time I go into that building, he says, now he says president, but he used to say, Donald, look at the stone, it's so beautiful. And after saying it to me like 12 times, I said, what is it? He said, it's Jerusalem stone. It's so beautiful, very, very expensive. He's a very rich guy. He talks about the cost of stone, right? That's why he's rich, I guess, right? When you think. But he said, it's so beautiful, and I'm so proud of it. Jerusalem stone. So now I'm sitting here talking about building something in Jerusalem. and we're going to do a renovation of an existing building. And I said, listen, can we wrap that building in Jerusalem stone? Is it expensive? They said, absolutely not. We're in Jerusalem. We can buy it for free. So the whole building is made out of Jerusalem stone. Isn't that good? Sort of good. A little business story. But I did something else. And we got it built. You know, that thing would have never been built, the $2 billion building. It would have been years and years and years. And you might not have, they probably would have ended the whole concept of even moving the embassy to Jerusalem. It would have. So we got it built. And there's no reason to do any better because it's really a beautiful embassy, one of our nicest embassies, I think. But someday they'll come along and say, let's waste billions of dollars and do it the way we originally planned. But it's a great embassy, and I was very proud to do it. But we did something else that they weren't even asking for. The most pro-Israel people weren't even asking. I recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. And that has been going on. And that has been going on for 51 years. They've been trying to get that. People would fly in, fly out. They'd have meetings every 2 years. People would fly in, talk about it, fly out. I brought some people that truly knew Israel and understand Israel. I said, explain Golan Heights to me. You have 5 minutes or less. And they did it in about 3 minutes. But they talked about the importance. They talked about the height, the visibility, the military protection, all of the different things. And I approved it. And nobody even asked for it because they thought that was too far-fetched. But I got Golan Heights approved for Israel. And nobody talks about that one, but that was a big one. And then the biggest of all, but this administration has totally blown it. I pulled out of the horrible, horrible, one-sided, miserable Iran nuclear deal, which was expiring just about now anyway. And they were ready, had the election gone the way it should have gone, they were ready to make any deal with me. And as you know, I said to China, you can't buy. If you buy, we're not going to do business with you. Okay, we won't buy. No oil from Iran. Nobody was buying oil. They were ready to make a deal. We would have made a great deal for everybody. They would have been terrific. We all would have. They were dying to make a deal. And then when that tragedy turned out, the world's most corrupt election, when that tragedy turned out, what happened is everybody started buying oil from Iran, and Iran now is very rich. And instead of having a great negotiating position, we have a terrible negotiating position. And they're actually trying to make a deal that was worse than the first one. The first one was horrible. The first one was a short-term deal. I mean, it wasn't like it was for 50 years or 100 years. It would be expiring just about now. So, and that was a license for them to make nuclear weapons. And you cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. You cannot let it happen because bad things will happen if that happens. But I got that approved. That was the biggest of all. That was bigger than Jerusalem. That was bigger than the Golan Heights. I always considered that to be the biggest. But unfortunately, they took that deal and didn't do anything. Iran was they were dying to make a deal, and they didn't do anything with it. And then, of course, we did the Abraham Accords, which would have been, I mean, something incredible. Something incredible. So we took care of Israel like no president has ever. In fact, they said if I ran for prime minister of Israel, I'd get 99% of the votes. I'm thinking about doing that. We delivered the largest tax cuts and regulatory cuts on record in the history of our country. And we built the greatest economy in the history of the world. There's never been an economy like the economy we had. More jobs, more everything that we've ever had before. We achieved energy independence, and we're ready to be energy dominant. We were going to supply oil to all over Europe, everywhere. I was the one that brought up Nord Stream 2. You remember that. Nobody ever heard of Nord Stream 2. I said to Germany, Angela Merkel, I said, you can't make that deal. If you make that deal, that means you're going to be subservient to Russia. She said, no, Donald, this will be wonderful. It didn't turn out to be too good for them. Then gas prices, when I was in office, reached low numbers like $1.87 a gallon and even less. Think of that. Now they go to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And it hasn't stopped. Wait till you see what's going to be happening over the next 2 years. We created the most secure border in U.S. history, built nearly 500 miles of border wall, which was so helpful. Got Mexico to give us 28,000 soldiers free of charge. I said, look, if you're not going to give them free, I'm going to have to tariff all of the cars that you're building. Because, you know, they took those car companies out of Detroit and other places, and they now build 32% of our cars that are built in Mexico. I said, I'm going to put tariffs on if you don't give us the soldiers. And they said, we would love to give you the soldiers. It would be. We had the Remain in Mexico. That's for all the people that are pouring in. And I believe the number is going to be, Lindsay, 15 million people by the end of this year. And they come out of mental institutions. They come out of jails. They come out of insane asylum, which is a stronger word. They said, don't use those words, sir. They're nasty. But insane asylums, very sick people. And they're being, and terrorists are being poured into our country like never before. And I also terminated the ridiculous catch and release. The ridiculous. You catch the people and you release them in our country, okay? Now, well, now with Biden, basically that's what they do. But we caught the people and we released them outside of our country. I fully rebuilt the U.S. military, created Space Force, and defeated ISIS and brought our troops back home. You remember during the campaign, do you remember when they said, oh, he's going to bring us into World War III. He's going to bring us in personality type. I said, no, my personality is going to keep you out of World War III. That's what happened. But all of that was only the beginning, and here's just some of the bold agenda that I'll immediately implement when we become the 47th President of the United States. And I'll work with the people here and a lot of other people in Washington right now, because I just rode through Washington, and it doesn't look like it used to look with me. They have fences around their parks. They have tents up all over the place, tents. This is the capital. This is the most important thing. Think of this, the capital of our country. It's got papers all over the streets. The sidewalks are filthy dirty. I used to drive by and I'd be screaming over the phone, get those sidewalks clean, get this, get that. You got to get the tents down. You can't have the tents. You know, once those tents form, once you leave 4 or 5 of them, there was a group of 4 or 5, and I told Secret Service, you got to get over it. We got to take it down immediately, because once that happens, you have 10, then you have 20, then you have hundreds. And what's happened to this city since I've been gone is, oh, it's so sad. It's so dirty and filthy, and people are stopping coming. And that's true in a lot of other cities, too. You look at Chicago, you look at San Francisco, look at New York, what's going on. All Democrat-run. But it was so sad to see. You know, I look forward to coming here, but it was a very sad trip between the airplane and here, because I'm looking at something that I don't even recognize. It's so dirty, and it shouldn't be that way. It's a great place, and it shouldn't be that way. When I get back at the Oval Office, I will totally obliterate the deep state. Remember, we didn't know if there was a deep state. People would say, yeah, I don't know. Now about everybody thinks, yeah, there's a deep state. It's a bad, I call it a bad state. I'll fire the unelected bureaucrats who have weaponized our justice system. And they have weaponized. And we'll create the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to declassify and publish all documents on deep state spying. They spy on so much. Censorship, corruption, including all of that on Christians. The Christians have been under siege under this administration. Just please remember that. Please remember that when they tell you about how much they love you. They don't love you at all. They don't love you at all. Never again will federal law enforcement be used to target religious believers. And hopefully never again will it be used to target opponents in an election, because that's what they're doing. Americans of faith are not a threat to our country. Americans of faith are the soul of our country. And when I'm back in the White House, I will once again appoint rock-solid conservative judges and the mold of justices like Antonin Scalia and the great Clarence Thomas, who really they are going after right now very unfairly. You read that, sir, very unfairly. And before Election Day 2024, I will again release the full list of names from which I will select my appointments to the United States Supreme Court. I did that last time, and it had a big impact. To stop the Marxist, and they are indeed Marxist, or worse, fascist, Marxist, prosecutors who release rapists and murderers while persecuting conservatives and people of religion. I will direct a completely overhauled DOJ to investigate every radical DA in America, AG in America, for their illegal racist and reverse enforcement of the law. These are bad people. And they're being run by the DOJ, just in case you have any questions. You know, in New York, where they go after me, never had a problem. All of a sudden, I got a DA who's after me. Bragg. But you know what they did? They put people from the DOJ into the DA's office. Can you believe it? I don't even think that's legal, they say. But I have DOJ prosecutors in there telling them how to go about it. But they haven't done a very good job because they have no case. To deter illegal immigration coming from jails and these mental institutions that I've told you about, all of the terrorists we're infiltrating, and they're infiltrating our country like never before in the history of our country. I don't think any country in the world has gone through this. And I always say, even a third world country wouldn't allow people in like this. They would stand there with sticks and stones. They wouldn't allow it to happen. One thing, nobody's been able to tell me why this is a good thing. Why is it a good thing? It's not good politically. Now, they all say, oh, no, they'll go and they'll vote. Well, first of all, we're doing very well with Hispanics, and large numbers are Hispanics. But you know, even more so, they don't need people because they cheat so much on the voting, they don't need. But if you think about their policies, open borders, high taxes, high interest rates, no voter ID, bad military, woke military, all these things, you can't win on policy unless you cheat. Just think about it. How can you win on any of those things? Does anybody really, I don't care, give me the most liberal person, does anybody who's liberal or anything else want people to march and steam into our country and just come into our country? We have no checks, no balances, we have no idea who they are. And they do. They come from prisons and mental institutions, many of them. The mental institutions and the prisons in countries all over the world are being emptied out into the United States of America right now. Now, how the hell is that good politics? I don't understand it. And yet, they get votes. They get votes. Somebody someday will explain it, or maybe people just don't know. That's why I say it as many times as I can, because nobody can want that to happen. I've already announced that I will sign on day one an executive order ending automatic citizenship for the children of illegal aliens. You have to do that. We're the only country in the world that does it. If you literally set a foot in the sand across the border, your child is called welcome to being an American citizen. It's so unfair to our country. In addition, here are some of the other actions I'll take to restore the border of the United States and to make it safe again. We had the most successful and strongest border in American history, and to get it back, I will immediately reinstate all of the incredibly successful border policies of the Trump administration, including our Safe Third agreements, which you know what that means. Remain in Mexico, that's pretty obvious what that means. Our asylum bans, we didn't let a lot of bad people in. We will complete even more border wall. We built the border wall, and then we were going to add another 200 miles. And that's when I knew they actually wanted, because in 3 weeks they could have had it completed. And they not only didn't complete it, they took the gates, the fences, and the walls, and they moved it to other parts of the country so that nobody could get to it. And I said, you know, they must really want to have open borders, because we added, in certain areas, it's a little like water coming through, right? And you have certain areas that you learn when the wall is up. So we were closing up those areas, would have been just incredible. And they didn't want that to happen. They actually took it. Texas wanted to buy it from the federal government. They said, we don't sell it. We wouldn't sell it to you under any circumstances. So that's when I realized for the first time that they were actually serious, that they want totally open borders, which is absolutely insane. And we're going to restore the prosecution policy, which saw a record number of prosecutions of illegal aliens who had to leave the country. We had to get them out. Sometimes they were so evil, so bad, that would put them in prisons in our own country because they have a tendency to come back. But they weren't able to come back because we had a very strong border. Drugs now are, think of this number. We did very well on drugs. Not well enough, by the way. Nobody does well enough until they're gone. because I believe we're going to lose 350,000 people this year and destroy families all over our country. It's like an invasion. But drugs now are 12 times higher than they were just 2.5, 3 years ago. 12 times higher. They're pouring in. Fentanyl is pouring in. President Xi and I had a deal. He was going to make it criminal to make fentanyl in China. There'd be no more fentanyl coming from China. When I didn't win the election, meaning I won it, but when it was rigged, when the election took place, he said, well, I don't have to go by that deal anymore. He didn't want that deal. But it's made much of it in China, and it flows through the border. We want people to come into our country, but we want them to come into our country legally. We want people to come in. We want them to come in legally. And furthermore, I'll fully implement Title 42 across the entire southern border based on all of the diseases that illegal aliens are bringing in. It's unbelievable that even the judge in the case said, do you know what you're doing? Because the Biden administration wanted it terminated. And the judge wouldn't do it, but it terminated itself. Judge can't do anything about that. Judge said, you know what you're doing by asking for this? And we will have to do rapid deportation of all of these border crossers. But we have people that are very seriously ill with contagious diseases, and they're pouring into our country along with all of the rest. We have no idea who these people are. Nobody cares. Nobody cares on the other side. They can just come in. A friend of mine called. He said, how do I go about becoming a citizen? Do I take classes? I say, well, don't say I said it. But if you happen to walk down to the border, just walk across and you'll be fine. You know, it takes some people 10, 12 years. They go take tests. It's a beautiful thing to watch. And they love the country so much, and yet others just walk across the border. I'll also use Title 42 to end the child trafficking crisis by returning all trafficked children to their families in their home countries immediately. Horrible. Horrible. And I'll shift massive portions of the existing federal law enforcement apparatus to immigration enforcements, including parts of the DEA, ATF, FBI, and Homeland Security investigators. We're going to move them around. I will issue a policy directive making clear that a core national defense mission is to protect American sovereignty, and therefore we must use any and all resources necessary to stop this incredible invasion. It's an invasion, including moving thousands of troops currently stationed overseas and elsewhere to our own southern border. Following the Eisenhower model, I don't know if you know this, but Eisenhower was very strong on the border. We will carry out the largest domestic deportation operation in American history, and we're going to get the bad ones out quickly. We got a lot of real bad ones. You know, these countries are very smart. I got to know all of the heads of the countries. They're very smart, very streetwise, and they don't let their good people come. They send the people in the caravans that they don't want, even if they're not officially criminals, if they're not officially, bad people, as we say, or people with serious medical problems. They want their people to stay in their countries. They don't want them to leave. And they organize many of the caravans. The people, the heads of the countries organize these caravans, and they come right into the United States now. We stopped them. We stopped them cold, but they come right into the United States now. I will invoke the Alien Enemies Act, something people didn't even know we had, to remove all known or suspected gang members, drug dealers, or cartel members from the United States, ending the scourge of illegal alien gang violence once and for all. We were very tough on MS-13, the gang members. They don't like me at all. They don't like me too much. We will destroy the cartels, including by deploying U.S. Navy to impose a full naval embargo to close the waters of our region, because the land will be closed up, and to all smugglers and traffickers. And they traffic mostly in women, just in case you didn't know that. It's mostly women, not children, not men. It's mostly in women. It's a horrible thing. It sounds like almost a prehistoric thing, but it's not. It's very modern. And what's made it so bad is the internet. It's like a big, huge business, but they traffic mostly in women. During my administration, we also took extraordinary steps to improve vetting for legal entry to keep criminals, thugs, and terrorists the hell out of our country. We strengthened the citizenship test by a lot. We stripped citizenship from those who threatened our security as a nation. We did social media vetting and created the first ever national vetting center. It's very successful. We found laws that had never been used before, and we use them now because not easy to go through Congress, but there are so many laws. We used many of them and very successful, including the right to tariff by the president, because again, China paid us and other countries paid us hundreds of billions of dollars, and it saved our businesses too, made them competitive. Today, I'm announcing a new plan to protect the integrity of our immigration system. Federal law prohibits the entry of communists and totalitarians into the United States. But my question is, what do we do with the ones that are already here that grew up in it? I think we have to pass a new law for them. Using federal law in Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, I will order my government to deny entry to all communists and all Marxists. Those who come to and join our country must love our country. We want them to love our country. We don't want them when they want to destroy our country. Welcome to America. We want to destroy your country. Thank you very much. So we're going to keep foreign Christian-hating communists, Marxists, and socialists out of America. We're keeping them out of America. When I was president, the world was stable and calm because America was respected and strong. Now, as we see in Russia and all of these other places, this whole world is on fire. This world is on fire. Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine totally settled. I'll have it done in 24 hours. I say that, and I would do that. That's easy compared to some of the things. I'd get that done in 24 hours. I know them both. I know them both. As the Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers. See that? I will be your peacemaker. I was your peacemaker. Well, that's great. Blessed are the peacemakers. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. But it's so true, the peacemakers. I will stop Joe Biden's inflation nightmare, save the U.S. economy, and I will always protect Medicare and Social Security, which for some very bad politicians, it's under siege. I don't know if you know that. It's under siege by people that tried to do it before. I won't mention names. As your president, I will continue to stand proudly for pro-life policies, just as I did for 4 strong years. And we cannot, in this room, and Republicans, but the people in this room, we cannot be afraid to take on the Democrat extremists. We can't be afraid. We have to be strong and powerful. That's why when I'm reelected, I will continue to fight against the demented late-term abortionists in the Democrat Party who believe in unlimited abortion on demand and even executing babies after birth. These are very troubled people, and the American public is on our side by overwhelming margins. You know, the politicians are going to have to learn to talk about this issue because they are the radicals. We're not the radicals. When you kill a baby after 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, remember the governor of Virginia? He said, yes, the baby is born, you lay the baby aside, and then you make a determination as to what you do with the babies. In other words, he would kill the baby after, and you have many, they believe in that. That's what they want. They are the radical extremists. We're not the radical extremists. And politicians have to say that. They have to say that because they come out as radical. And the Democrats that believe in this late-term abortion, thanks to the Supreme Court decision of exactly 1 year ago, we gave those who have long been fighting for pro-life cause, negotiating power for the first time ever. You have tremendous negotiating power. Now, with Roe v. Wade, you had none. You had no power. We've now given pro-life people tremendous power to negotiate something that will be happy, that will be good for everybody. And you have power for the first time. You didn't have that power. You had no power. They could do anything. They could kill the baby after the baby was born. They could kill the baby in the 9th month. These are horrible, horrible things to think about. And even other countries, other than 2 countries, I won't mention their names, China and North Korea. They have very strong limits. But I believe the greatest progress for pro-life is now being made in the states where everyone wanted to be. That's one of the reasons they wanted Roe v. Wade terminated, is to bring it back into the states where a lot of people feel strongly it should be, and where legal scholars feel very strongly it should be, with the 3 exceptions that I support and Ronald Reagan before me supported for rape, incest, and for the life of the mother. A lot of people are more and more coming into that fold, and it's something you have to very consider. You have to go with your heart. You have to go with your mind. You have to make that decision. But the 3 exceptions, and Ronald Reagan was there a long time ago, and I got through 2 very successful campaigns. Actually, my second campaign was much more successful. I got 12 million more votes, so I don't know. I wonder what happened. Wonder what happened. However, there, of course, remains a vital role for the federal government in protecting unborn life. And it's very important. And I propose for you tonight, just as I did when I said that we will win the Supreme Court decision on abortion. Remember, I said that during my campaign. Everyone said, that's not going to happen. Nobody thought that was going to happen. But I will fight for you like no president has ever fought before. We'll get something done for the country. We're going to be for the country. We will defeat the radical Democrat policy of extreme late-term abortion, and we will bring everybody together to protect our precious unborn babies in a very, very big way. And now you have the power to do it because we terminated Roe v. Wade. Every child born and unborn is a sacred gift from God. 6 nations to reject the globalist claim of an international right to abortion. This declaration affirms the family as the foundation of a good and great society and states that every human being has the inherent right to life. And Joe Biden withdrew the United States from this historic declaration his very first week in office, as he did so much else. They ended Anwar, the biggest drilling site in the world, probably larger than Saudi Arabia, if you can believe it. This was in Alaska. Ronald Reagan couldn't get it done. Nobody could get it done. I got it done. And in the first week in office, he terminated Anwar. Would have been unbelievable, would have been great, but we'll bring it back. We'll bring it back. So many different things they terminated. But some things they couldn't terminate, like the tax cuts. They have never been able to do that. A lot of the regulation cuts that created all those jobs, they're having a hard time with that. But I'll return us to where we were right on day one. We're going to be returning our country very quickly. It's going to happen very fast. We know the right people. You know, I went through a lot of people. Some were fantastic. They were great. And some weren't good. But I came here, and I was only in Washington 17 times during my entire life. I read this in an article, so I assume it's true. Of course, it was written by a group that I'm not a big believer, but they said 17 times. I never stayed over. And I wasn't a part of Washington society, so I had to rely on people for recommendations. And many of them were good. Look, we rebuilt our military. We did so many incredible things, the tax cuts, the regulation cuts. We had great people, but we had some people that I wouldn't have chosen if given a second shot. We had weak people. We had stupid people. We had people that had no leadership ability. We had some very bad people. We had some very great people that I'd use again in a heartbeat. Look at all the things we did. We did that because of great people. But now I know everybody. I know people. I don't have to rely on some rhino saying, why don't you give us this one to head intelligence? How about this guy to head intelligence, sir? You know, you had to rely on some rhinos that you don't want to rely on anymore, but you really learn, and you have to learn fast or you got some problems. But as we continue to fight for the unborn, and conservatives also have a duty to support the loving choice of adoption, including faith-based adoption. That's why, as part of extending the Trump tax cuts, you know, we're going to have to, the time is coming up, we're going to have to extend that. I will ask Congress to expand the adoption tax credit. We'll do that because a lot of people have been adopting, and that's a great thing. Another top priority will be to expel the communists and these terrible people that have taken over our education system, when you look. I will immediately sign a new executive order to cut federal funding for any school pushing critical race theory, transgender insanity, and other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content on our children. And I always say this, can you believe this? Can you imagine saying this 10 or 15 years ago? I will fight for parents' rights. Of course you fight for. Today I have to say, I have to make it, I will fight for parents' rights. Of course you fight for parents' rights. Who would ever think you have to say that as a politician or as a person at a microphone, including the right to send your child to the public, private, charter, or religious school of your choice. At the same time, I refuse to abandon our public school system to these lunatics, because what's happening there is terrible. That's why I will fight for the direct election of school principals by the parents of the school. If any principal is not getting the job done, the parents should be able to vote to fire them immediately and to select someone who will. And I will not give one penny to any school from kindergarten through college. And something else I find hard to believe that I have to even say, it's so ridiculous. It's so horrible and so ridiculous. I will keep men out of women's sports. So horrible. And I will sign a law prohibiting child sexual mutilation in all 50 states. Prohibited. And on day one, I will reinstate the Trump ban on transgenders in the military. We had it banned. Because our warriors should be focused on crushing American enemies, especially when you see what's happening in the world today, not catering to radical gender ideology. So you know I had this in the military. And a lot of the generals that I dealt with, the real generals, the good ones, the generals that weren't involved in the worst, most embarrassing day of our lives as a country, and that was the removal of our military from Afghanistan before our American citizens were taken out, before our soldiers were protected, leaving $85 billion worth of brand new Trump equipment. I bought it all, brand new, beautiful. New tanks, new planes, 70, think of this, 70,000 vehicles, some of them, many of them armor-plated, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars and even $1 million each. 700,000 rifles, guns, and that type of equipment. And now Afghanistan is the second or third largest seller of military equipment in the world, because they don't need 700,000 rifles, do they? The best equipment, the finest equipment. The night goggles that they have are better than ours, brand new, not even taken out of the box. Now they fight at night because they never did. They couldn't see. Now they see very nicely. But as you know, in the military, you're not allowed to take virtually any drugs. You're not allowed to take drugs. You take an aspirin, you have a problem. And to have this operation, you have massive amounts of drugs required on a daily basis. Massive, massive amounts of drugs. Furthermore, I will ban all taxpayer funding for sex or gender transitions at any age. And just as I've done for 4 years, I will fully uphold our Second Amendment. We need our Second Amendment. I will bring back free speech in America. And finally, to restore pride in our history and confidence in our future, I will lead a massive year-long salute to America to celebrate the 250th anniversary. On July 4th, this was July 4th, 1776, okay? There are other dates you hear about, but this is the date that we recognize, 1776, and we're going to have a big celebration, and it's going to be a celebration like we really deserve in this country for everything we've gone through. With you at my side, we will give our nation's founding the amazing anniversary party that America needs and so richly deserves. Days from now, all of us will be celebrating this year's Independence Day at a very challenging time for our country. As we do, let us remember the words of one Massachusetts preacher during the Revolutionary War on an autumn night in 1777, when the fate of our nation looked very, very bleak, much as it does in many ways right now. Be of good courage, he urged the patriots in the pews, because the cause of American independence is a glorious, glorious cause. It is because of our corrupt and inept leadership and the power of modern-day weaponry. It's so powerful, so horrible. It's so horrible. The levels of power, you've never seen anything like it. Shouldn't even be discussed. It wasn't talked about very much during my term. I didn't want to have anyone talk, but the level of power of modern-day weaponry is horrible. It's the most dangerous period in the history of our country. It's time for us, because of all of this, so scary. We have leaders that don't have a clue. We have leaders that have no idea what they're doing. They have no idea. We have leaders that are totally corrupt. These are corrupt people. It's time for us to keep our faith, our unity, and our resolve. We must be strong like never before. We must be unstoppable. Together we will take on the communists and the Marxists and the fascists and the globalists and the fake news media, which is just as bad as all of them. And we have to take on crooked Joe Biden and the worst administration in the history of this country. And propelled by the spirit of July 4th, 1776, we will win a righteous and resounding victory on November 5th, 2024, and we will make America great again, greater than ever before. Thank you all very much. God bless you. God bless you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
You know, I just wish that President Trump would come out of his shell. I need you all to be seated. We got a little bit of business we do. I promise it's only going to take 2 minutes. I want my staff to close the doors. No one is to leave until I conduct this business. Let's thank President Trump one more time for tonight's remarks. And all the candidates who graced our stage this weekend, let's thank them all for coming. We appreciate it. Before we go, there's a few people that I have to thank. If you could be quiet and take your seats, I'd appreciate it. Please be quiet and take your seats. Thank you. We have the doors guarded. You know, to put on an event of this magnitude with over 75 speakers, thousands of attendees, hundreds of credentialed media is a massive undertaking. And the person behind the scenes who's back there wearing a headset, joy. And you know, sometimes I get too much of the credit, but the day-to-day officer, the day-to-day management of Faith and Freedom is run by an extraordinary man who does an amazing job, and that's my collaborator and my colleague. I think he does an outstanding job. Let's thank Tim Head for the great job he does as executive director. Great job, Tim. And we're going to close in prayer in a minute, but Tim has to thank our sponsors. You know, your registration fee does not cover the cost of a conference of this magnitude.